What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to learn how to make a slide out side menu from scratch. So here's the app we'll make. We got this nice button up here, and when you open it up, as expected, you've got this menu. So we'll take a look at that. In addition, we'll actually take a look at hooking up these options, because I think a lot of videos show how to do this, but the actual important piece of switching controllers isn't really talked about. So this is all built with professional kind of pattern in mind, with different controllers and making sure things are nice and organized between different view controllers and child controllers. So if that all sounds good, definitely start by destroying the like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're into iOS and haven't done so already. Let's get into making this side menu from scratch. Alright, we're going to go ahead and get started by opening up Xcode and creating a new project. We're going to stick with the app template under iOS, and let's go ahead and give this a project name of side menu. Make sure your language is set to Swift, lifecycle UIKit, and interface is storyboard. Even though we're going to work programmatically, we still need to start off with that. Go ahead and save the project wherever you like. I'll toss it onto my desktop, and first things first, we're going to expand the window and close that right panel. Now, the other thing that we need to do before we jump into the side menu code is right-click our main.storyboard, hit delete, and hit move to trash. Now we also need to jump into our info.plist and hit the main storyboard row and hit backspace to delete it. We also want to open up this application scene manifest until you get all the way to the bottom and delete the main storyboard reference in there as well. And the other thing I'm going to do is actually rename this view controller to be a container view controller. And I'll also change the name of the file here. Now, to make sure that we're going to be using that container controller instead of the storyboard, we need to jump into our scene delegate. And in the first function here, we want to go ahead and set up our applications window. So I'm going to say window is UI window with a window scene. Window.rootViewController is going to be a container view controller. And then we're going to say window, make key and visible. And then finally, self.window will be window. So let's go ahead and do that. And before we actually go further, let's make sure our app is working. So in here, I'm just going to set a background color, perhaps of red. Go ahead and pick a simulator of your choice and hit run to make sure that our app is nice and happy now that we've deleted the storyboard. And then we'll jump into some side menu implementation. So bear with our simulator here, and boom, we've got our red screen, so we're in business. Alright, so let's talk about how we're going to build out our side menu. So what we actually want to do is, by the name it probably implies it, in our container controller, we want to have two view controllers, and one is going to represent the actual content, and the other one is going to represent the menu itself. So that said, what we're going to do to keep things nice and organized is I'm going to create a new group on the left hand here. And we're going to create a group for view controllers and drag in container into here. Let's go ahead and create two new files in here. The first one, and actually what we can do is use a Cocoa Touch class, is going to be called a menu view controller of type UI view controller. And then we want one more, and this other one is going to be a home view controller, once again of type view controller. So inside of home view controller, let's get started by deleting all of this jazz here. And I'm going to go ahead and say view.background color is perhaps system background. I'm also going to give it a title of home. And let's go into our menu. And in here, we're also going to delete all this commented out code, and we're going to give this a background color of UI color with red, green, and blue, and we're going to say 33/255, which is a pretty dark menu looking color. So let's go ahead and copy and paste that, and alpha will be 1. Now, if we jump back into our container view controller, what we want to do is add both the menu and the home as child view controllers. So I'm going to go ahead and say add child VCs right here. And what we'll go ahead and do is we're going to create this function. And what I'm going to say here is we want to go ahead and first add the menu. So it's the bottom controller in terms of the z-axis, and then add home on top of it. Now to go ahead and actually do this, what we can say up here is lazily create. Doesn't actually even have to be lazy. We can say menu VC is the menu view controller. And if autocomplete is giving you a hard time, go ahead and hit Command B. You might sometimes need to close Xcode and reopen it, and your autocomplete will get its life together. So you saw, for me at least, Xcode is deciding to be difficult. I like leaving this stuff in the video because we all love the pain of Xcode here. But let's also go ahead and create our home VC, which is going to be an instance of our home view controller. And now that we have both of these here we can say add child of menu view controller. We want to go ahead and say view, add subview of the menus view. Then we want to go ahead and say menu VC did move to parent of self because the menu controller is now a child of this container controller. So looking pretty good. We're going to do this exact same thing for the home controller. So we can say add child, home VC. We're going to then add home VC's view. So we'll say view, add subview. And we can add in home VC's view, but actually instead of adding home VC's view, what I'm going to actually do here is we're going to say that there is a navigation controller that's going to wrap home view controller, and the reason is because the navigation controller will give us the bar and the title at the top. But once we've gone ahead and done that, we can say nav VC did move to parent of self. So go ahead and give your application a run, and what we expect to see now is our white view controller with a navigation bar at the top with our title of home. So bear with us, simulator loves to be slow, but there is our home header right up there. Looking pretty solid. So the next thing we actually want to do is have a button at the top left here that we can tap on to open up our side menu. So that's going to be in the home view controller. All we need to do here is set a navigation item, and it's left bar button item. It'll be a UI bar button item with a image style and a target action. So we're going to say the image is going to be a system name. I will grab that momentarily. Style will be done. Target will be self, and action will be a function that we create. So selector, did tap, menu, button. So we'll come back to actually implementing this function here that will stub out momentarily. But the first thing we want to do is open up SF symbols. This is Apple's icon library for those of you not familiar. So we can actually grab any of these here. There's quite a few to choose from. Some people like line horizontal. I'm going to use this bulleted list one. So you can go ahead and copy the name of it and just paste it in right here. And let's see if we give it a run, what this ends up looking like if we see our menu button or not. So we definitely see our menu icon right there. Tapping it right now, nothing happens. So what do we want to do when we actually tap on this? Well, the tricky thing is we want to basically animate this home controller in the container so it reveals the menu behind it. But these controllers are separate. So how do we communicate from the home back to this container? For those of you familiar with this concept, you know that we're going to use a delegate. So I'm going to create a protocol up here, which is going to be the home view controller delegate. And it's going to extend any object, and it's going to have a single function of did tap menu button, just like that. Now we're going to have a reference of the delegate on here, which will be weak so we don't cause a memory leak. And what we can now say here in this function is delegates and call the only delegate function that is available. So now what we want to do is we want to make this container view controller a delegate for the home controller. So we're going to write an extension for the controller, the container view controller, conforming to the delegates, and we'll bring in that single function here. Now in here we want to animate the menu itself just like that. But how do we actually get that working? Well, the first thing we want to do is actually assign that property on home VC. So we'll say home VC's.delegate will be self. So go ahead and let me actually add a print in here so we can actually validate that we are getting this function call. So let's go ahead and run our app. I'm going to tap on this, and you can see right there in the bottom that we are indeed printing this message in the console every time we tap on it. Now, the more interesting thing and the more important thing that we want to do is we want to animate our actual menu. So how do we do that? So what I mean by that is the menu is going to actually stay put since it's behind this, but what we want to do is make it look like it's revealed. So we want to actually move this home controller. So the first thing I'm going to do is create an enum in here, and it's going to be called menu state. And it's basically going to have two states, as you can imagine, opened and closed. And what we can do in here is have an instance of this. So the first one is going to be private var menu state will be menu state, and by default when our app launches, it's definitely closed because it's going to be kind of weird if it's open by default. And what we can do in here is we can switch on the menu state. We can say if it's closed, we want to go ahead and open it, and if it's opened, we want to go ahead and close it. So let me go ahead and add in some comments here. So looking pretty good. So when we want to open it, all we really need to do is do an animation. So we're going to say animates with duration. So there's a couple different animations we can do. There's also one in here with a spring velocity. So let's see if I can find that one. That one actually looks pretty nice as well. So let's do this one here. We'll say the duration is 0.5, delay is 0. Spring with dampening is 0.8. You can tweak these numbers and see how they feel. Initial velocity is 0. And for options, you can say curve ease in or ease out. It'll just make it be a little slower when it animates when it starts, and then stop so it's not so linear. And then our actual animations, we'll need to do something here. And we want to do something in our completion as well once it's done. So what are our actual animations going to be? Well, it's pretty simple. We're going to say self.home.vc.view, and it's frame origin x. And what we want to go ahead and actually do is just move the origin x over. So what I can say here is make this the entire width, subtracting maybe 100. So you can do this calculation in different ways. It's a little subjective. Let's just toss a break down here momentarily. Let me give this a run so you can actually see what's going on. So when we tap on this guy here, if you look at that, the whole thing just moved over. So one thing which is a little problematic is, well, what the heck just happened here if this view moves but the title bar didn't? So that's not what we want. So what we actually want to do, if you recall up here, we have a property for home VC, but we also want to hold a nav VC since we're nesting the actual home controller inside of this navigation controller. So here I'm going to say self.navVC is going to be navVC. And down here, we can animate the navigation controller's view, adding in the question mark since it is optional. So go ahead and tap on this, and now this whole thing moves over. Now, when we tap on this again, nothing actually happens because we aren't handling this yet. And the other thing that we want to make sure we do in this completion block is first capture weak self. And I'm going to say for self.menu_state, once the animation is done, it's now going to be open, and make sure it's menu state there. And now this is pretty simple. We want to do the inverse to close it. So first and foremost, once this is done, it'll be closed, and the origin X now is going to just be 0 like it was before. So go ahead and give this a run once more. We tap on it, we tap the button again, it closes. Pretty darn cool. So the next thing we want to actually do is actually put something in our menu, and we tap on one of those options. We want to be able to come back and switch controllers in this primary UI here. So that's pretty simple as well. So let's jump into our menu view controller, and you guys can do this however you want. Using an enum is a pretty useful way to do this, but you can say menu options, and there's going to be a raw value of string, and it'll also be case iterable. And I'm going to go ahead and add a couple cases in here. So we'll go ahead and say home, let's see, home, about us, information, rate, app, we can just say rate. And let's see, for this about us, of course, we need to do this. So actually, let me be cleaner about this. What you probably want to do is assign the actual raw value instead of cheating. Generally, these shouldn't be capitalized, so we'll go ahead and just type these out and assign them. So we'll say case info will be information. The one thing you do want to be aware of, though, is that the order of these do in fact matter. So the order that you put these in here, we're going to use case iterable to maintain this order. So just be mindful of that. So just order them the way that you want it to show up. So let's put settings down at the bottom actually. So there is a list of options here. So what we can actually go ahead and do is we want to create a table view in here. So I'm going to say private let table view will be a table view in here. And we're just going to register a vanilla table view cell. We're not going to use any custom cell here. You could in fact use a custom cell if you wanted to, but we're not going to do that today since honestly a pretty plain vanilla cell actually looks pretty good. So we're going to go ahead and say view add subview table view. We want to assign the table view's delegate as well as its data source. And similar to any protocol or delegates, you need to go ahead and conform to all that stuff. So delegate and data source. Now we want the table view functions. So the first one is going to be number of rows, pretty simple. We're going to take our menu options.allcases.count. And in terms of the next function, we want cell for row at index path, and we want to dequeue a row from the table of type cell for a given index path, the one that is the parameter. We're going to say return cell, and here we can say the text is going to be menu option.allcases, and we want to get the nth position dot raw value. So that'll basically take it'll take whichever option we're at and it'll give us the string as the text. Now the third function we want is did select row at index path, and the first thing we'll do in here is say table view, go ahead and deselect it, aka unhighlight it. So let's see what more we need to do. We also want to go ahead and give our table view a frame in view did layout sub views. So I'm going to go ahead and override that and assign the frame here. So we're going to say table view, its frame is going to be x0, y will be view.safeAreaInsets.top. This will be view.bounds.size.width, and this one will be view.bounds.size.height. Now go ahead and give this a run. I know I went through it pretty quickly, but I'll explain it again. Let's go ahead and see what's going on. So first and foremost, we are crashing, which is not good. So let's see why we're crashing and debug this together. So let's see, it's yelling at us invalid argument for our actual cell, which leads me to believe we did not register it correctly. So let's see where my typo is here. We should be registering a cell.self, not a table view itself. I'm sure a lot of you guys saw me do that and were pulling your hair out. So if we go ahead and hit this, you'll now see we've got our table view showing up. One problem I see here is every cell in the table itself has a background color of white. So the one thing I'm going to do here is say table.background color should be nil. I'm also going to do that for each of these cells here. We'll say cell.background color is nil. And if nil isn't really, the desired look that we want, we can also go ahead and assign the background color, but I'll also nil it out for the content view. All right, so looking better. So one thing I see now is the table view itself still shows that white background. So what I'll actually go ahead and do is we'll assign the same background color we did to this controller as the cell background color. So I'm going to call this a gray color. I will go ahead and make this a global up here. We'll say gray color is our color like that. And down here, instead of nilling these out, go ahead and use gray color and gray color for both the background of the cell and the content view. All right, so the one problem I see now is we want our text to always be white, since we're going to always have this the menu be a darker color. So we're going to go ahead and say this is white. And I also want this to have a nice icon to the left of it, because what are menus if we don't have icons? So what I'll go ahead and do is I'm going to create a computed property here called maybe image name in our enum, and we are going to switch on self here, and I can actually let the error that pops up here in a moment input everything for me. You can click it and hit fix, And we're going to return basically a image name for each of these. So the first one here will be a house. This one, I guess, can be, I don't know, airplane. I'm kind of making them up at this point. This one will be a star. This one will be a message. This should be star. And this last one here will be a gear. Now, these are all SF symbol names. So you can open up the reference and take a look. But now what we can do down in our cell configuration is we can say cell.imageView.image can be our menu options.allcases.indexpath.row, and we have an image name here. Now this is a string, so we need to take this and wrap it inside of a UI image call, just like that. And we're also going to set the tint color on the image view to be white, so it matches our actual text. So go ahead and give that a run. Let's see what's going on. Looks like we've got an issue here. So let's see what I forgot to do. I forgot to put the return keyword right there before star. Go ahead and give that a run, and you'll now see you have a pretty cool looking menu at this point. Now, when we tap on these, something should happen, and clearly something isn't happening. So let's go ahead and hook that up. So very similar to our home controller using a delegate, we're going to create a delegate for our menu controller as well. So it's going to be a protocol right up here. And I'm going to go ahead and say func. And here we're going to say did select. We're going to use a menu item. So we're going to say did select menu item. And this is going to be our menu view controller dot menu option, just like that. And then we're going to create an instance of this here, which is going to be a weak var of type delegate. And once we actually select on an item, what we can do is say the item that we got is our menu options dot all cases get the positioned item that we tapped, and then we can call that delegate function passing in the item. So now we want to actually go back to our container controller. And our container controller should assign the menu vcs delegate to be self. And just like we conformed down here with this extension, I'm going to actually copy and paste it. We're going to conform to the menu view controller delegates, and it's going to have a single function in here. So let's see if my autocomplete will do its job. There it goes. And now what we can do is we know that we want to actually go ahead and close the view controller for the menu, so we can actually call did tap menu button. And it's a little bit of cheating in terms of the naming because you're not actually calling the menu button, so you might want to actually go ahead and create another function, albeit it's going to be the exact same code, but there is one distinction. So when we are actually done with this, we can actually call a completion handler where we'll present a different controller. So what I mean by that is, let's actually move this code into a dedicated function of toggle menu, and it's going to have a completion handler. And this completion handler, I'll say, is nothing to returning void. And what we'll do here is we want to first and foremost call this here. So we'll say toggle menu. And we don't want anything in this case, so what I'll actually do here is we're going to say that this completion handler is optional. So when we call this function from here, we can pass in nil, and then now here what I can actually do is call toggle menu, but in this case I do care about a completion handler because once we're done animating, what we want to do is we want to switch on the menu item, and we want to go to a different view controller depending on which item was selected. So I'm just going to do a different example for one of these. I'll put a break in the rest of them. So what I'll actually go ahead and do here is, let's break that as well, is we want to first call this completion in this function up here for toggle menu. So we should be closing the menu at this point. So what I'm going to go ahead and do here is we're going to say that at this point, call the completion. Now you might see an error here, and the reason for it is because this needs to be escaping, but since our closure is already optional, you'll see that we don't see the error because optional closures already are escaping. The one other thing we do want to make sure we do is call this on the main thread because this might execute asynchronously on a background thread. And since we want to present a different controller here, that's a UI operation that we'll want to do on a different, on the main UI thread. So let's see, that said, let's see what else we need to do. We're gonna capture weak self here. And what we'll want to go ahead and do here is present a different controller. So let me go ahead and create another controller. We're gonna right click this, new controller. Gonna go ahead and create a info view controller. Now all I'm gonna really do in here is just say title is going to be about this app, and we'll maybe also give it a nice background color of system green perhaps, and get rid of this comment. So now what we can do back in this controller is we can create an instance of it. So we'll say VC is our info controller, and you can do one of two things. I'll show you guys both approaches. We could present this controller, so I could say self.present, and I'll wrap it in a navigation controller with a root controller of VC, animated true, and let's see, this one should be, yep, animated true and completion of nil. So go ahead and let's go ahead and open up our menu, and I'm gonna hit, in this case, we're gonna hit on information. It closes, and notice that nothing is being presented. So let's figure out what the heck is going on that's incorrect. So the first thing I'm gonna go ahead and do is we're gonna print out did select. So we know for a fact that this is being called because the menu is in fact being closed, but what's not happening in this case is we're not seeing that green controller. So let's also go ahead and make sure our completion is being called. So we're gonna go ahead and say completion. And these print statements are often very helpful to debug. So we'll go ahead and hit this. I'm gonna go ahead and do that, and we'll see that it's selected, but completion is never called here. So let's see what the heck is going on. So we're saying that if it's open, we want to close it. So I put this in the wrong place. So this is why comments are always helpful. So we want to call completion once the menu is closed, because we want to present once it presumably closes. So go ahead and do that, and we should now see our green controller. So that's a good way to navigate. However, there's another thing which is commonly done, and that is instead of presenting something modally, you might want to change out the primary view here. So there are a number of ways you can do that. The first one is, and the most common one, is using child controllers. So just like we used the home view controller up here, we can create a info VC. And in this case, we're going to say this is lazy, so we don't create it as soon as the app launches. And in this case, what we can now do is we can say add info child. So what I can say here is say self dot info VC. We can actually unwrap it and say guardlet VC equals info VC. And I'm going to go ahead and say self dot add a child for view controller. And then what we want to go ahead and do is assign the views frame, and we might want to actually add it as a sub view first. So I can say vc.view, and notice that we're adding it to this view here. So this might not actually be suitable. So what you want to do is actually add it to the home VC's view, and you'll see momentarily why we want to do that. Then we want to say vc did move to parent of self. And keep in mind, we still need to give a frame to the view controller that we are adding. So it's going to be vcView.frame, and this is going to be the frame size of the home controller. So we'll say this dot bounds. So let's see, that's going to be optional. So we'll coalesce it to 0. Go ahead and give this a run, and let's see what ends up happening when we tap on the menu option. So we'll open this up. We'll tap on this, and we expect to see a green controller there. So let's see what's actually going on here. So let's see, uncaught exception, UI view controller inconsistency, reason child view controller should have a parent view controller. So let's see what's going on. So we're saying self add child. Then we're saying to this view, add that. We're saying VC did move to self. Now this self, keep in mind, we're capturing weak self here. So what we want to actually do is say guardlet strong self is self. And this is all because we are inside of a closure. So go ahead, and I presume what the option or issue here is we're passing in weak self, or we want to pass in strong self. So let's go ahead and give that a try. And let's see what's going on. Looks like we are still crashing, so something is up here. So we're saying VC is our info VC. We're adding view controller. We're adding VC's view. We're setting its view frame. And then we're also going ahead and we're saying VC did move to parent for strong self. So let's see what's going on. What I'll actually do is I'll just make it cleaner and say self add info. And I'll go ahead and create this as its own function just to make it a lot cleaner to actually read here. So we are going to say we'll be able to actually drop this guard. We actually don't need this either. And let's make our life simpler first and foremost. So we have our info view controller. We no longer need all these self optionals. We're going to say add child for VC. Let's go ahead and add this to view. We are going to say VC did move to parent, which is going to be self. And here we are going to say, let's just use view.frame. And let's make sure our green controller is first and foremost showing up. So go ahead and give it a run. And if we continue to have issues, we can debug it together, but we don't because it's now showing up. So sometimes doing things in a closure is a little tricky, or I probably had a silly typo. But one issue we now see is we don't see that button anymore up here. So what gives? That's not that good. So that's why we wanted to add this as a child of our home controller. So you could add it either there or to this one directly. So let's try adding it to our home VC. We can say add info VC as a child. We're going to say home VC. To its view, go ahead and add a subview. We're going to assign VC's view frame, and then we're going to say home VC did move to parent self, which is not what we want. We want to say VC did move to parent of home VC. So once you have a bunch of controllers, it gets a little hairy. So make sure you name things more appropriately. I just kind of named it in a not so great way. But now if you go ahead and tap on it, you'll see that the green controller, even though it's completely separate from home, is now showing up here. But we still see the title of home at the top. So the other thing that you might want to do is you might want to say home vc.title is now going to be vc.title. So instead of actually calling it home vc title, what you might want to actually do is call that your primary controller. So if I tap on this, you'll see it's now the about this app and it's green. Let's also work on tapping on home. So here we'll go ahead and say reset to home. And I'll go ahead and create this as a function itself. And in here, what we basically want to go ahead and do is remove info VC. So I'm going to say info VC.view remove from superview. We're going to say info VC, and we will say did move to parent and pass in nil. And we also want to remove a child view controller. So let's see, is there an info VC remove child? I think we actually don't even need a remove child now that I think about it. Remove child used to exist a long time ago. So I guess we only need to say did it move to that, and we should be good, but keep in mind we also want to reset the title of home VC to be home. So let me go ahead and give this a run and we'll see if everything is working as expected. So that's good. And once we tap on that, that's good as well. One thing which is a little questionable if it looks too great is the controller doesn't actually change until the animation is done. So it gives a little bit of a delay effect, which some people like and some people don't. Now it's really subjective. If you wanted to combat that, what you could do is ignore this completion handler entirely and pass in nil, just like we did up above. And you can just go ahead and throw that stuff right there. You no longer will need weak self. You will still need self dot. And what this will do is this will change the controller in parallel to the animation. You just need to be careful about the ordering of these events. So some people like this a lot better. I'm one of those people who thinks this looks a lot nicer, but you can go ahead and definitely do this. So there you have it. That's how you can create a slide out menu from scratch, no dependencies. The one other thing you might want to add is a tap gesture on the container controller here. And if the menu is open, when you tap anywhere here, it should close. Whereas right now you have to tap on this item up here, the button. So that's how you can add some pretty nice navigation. This is a very popular pattern, as I'm sure most of you are aware of. So if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to drop a like below if you haven't done so already. Subscribe for more iOS and Swift related content. I've got also my own courses over at iOSacademy.io if you like my teaching style. Take a look at those. We have Slack channels and it's a pretty engaged community, so check it out if you're into it, and definitely don't forget to leave a comment down below if you have any questions or video suggestions. Always love hearing from you guys. Thanks again for watching. I'll see you in the next video.